When investigators only have a surveillance photo as a clue during a missing person investigation, their job becomes much harder, as it doesn't provide them with much context, other than the fact that the person was in that area at that time. They then need to speak to eyewitnesses who saw that person before they went missing, and hope that they can establish their movements leading up to their disappearance. One of a parent's worst fears is that their child could go missing. Many people who have experienced this awful set of circumstances state that the worst thing about it is not knowing whether or not they're okay and whether they will ever see them again. This is the nightmare that Biljana Zelik faced in 1999, when her 26-year-old daughter, Donna Zelik, inexplicably disappeared from their home in Ontario, Canada. And it's a mystery that she still has to live with every day, as Donna's case has never been solved. Biljana originally hailed from Serbia. She married a Yugoslavian man named Mihailo, and the couple eventually had 2 children, Donna and her brother Bata. When the marriage ended in divorce, though, Biljana had to work 4 different jobs to care for her children, and despite her best efforts, Donna stated that she would have preferred to have lived with Mihailo. Following her graduation from high school, Donna met a man that she started dating, and they moved in together. But when the relationship ended, she struggled to get over it and started losing weight after moving back home. She immediately started looking for her own place. But before she could move out, she disappeared and has not been seen by her family since. The last time that Biljana saw her daughter was in the early morning hours of the 30th of August, 1999. That night, Donna was reading a book in the family's living room before eventually retiring to her bedroom. Biljana stated that she last saw Donna lying on her bed, still wearing the clothes that she had on during the day. Biljana then went to her room and fell asleep at around 3 a.m. When she woke up the next morning at about 7 a.m., she noticed that her daughter wasn't in her room, but she didn't think much of it, as she assumed that she'd gotten up early to visit one of her friends. But when it became clear that that wasn't the case, she checked her room again and realized that Donna had left her identification and, more importantly, her medication behind. She started to worry that something may be wrong and decided to file a missing person report. A search of the area didn't yield any results, and there was no indication of what could have happened to Donna, until Biljana spotted a photo from the Hamilton Spectator newspaper, which was running a story on the Take Back the Night rally that took place on the 16th of September. In the photo, Donna can be seen walking with another man while their arms are interlocked, and her family describes her as looking frail, causing them further concern for her welfare. The case would have another twist in store when Biljana received a series of strange phone calls. Biljana reported to investigators that she was receiving strange phone calls from an unknown number, and that the person on the other side of the line always hung up before she could find out who it was. On one occasion, a message was left on her answering machine with a female voice saying, "Hi Mom, I'm okay." Donna's friends and family were never sure whether it was Donna's voice in the message, and before it could be handed over to investigators, it was accidentally erased. Almost a year after the photo was published, one of Donna's male friends contacted the police to report that Donna had called him. He was unaware that she was the focus of a missing person investigation at the time, and reported that she was now living about 30 miles from her hometown. She didn't give any further details though, so investigators had no clue as to who she was with or where her exact whereabouts were. Donna was spotted one last time 2 years later in 2002, when a friend of hers reported seeing her inside of a bookshop in her hometown. There's a lot of ambiguity regarding this sighting, as this branch of the bookstore had closed 2 years earlier, and the friend may have gotten mixed up with a branch in Ancaster, which was still operating. Donna has still not been found more than 2 decades after she vanished, but her family remains hopeful that she will be found safely one day. They describe her as standing 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing around 100 pounds. She has brown hair, brown eyes, and can be identified by a birthmark on her neck. She'd been known to use 3 different names other than her own, including Frankie, Alex, and Donna. If you have any information on Donna's case, you're asked to contact the Hamilton Police Service at 915-546-4962. On the 19th of February, 2016, 37-year-old Catherine Ackling Bryan seemed to be out of sorts when she dropped her 2 daughters off at school for the day. She'd been crying on the way there, according to the 2 girls, and seemingly didn't care that one of them was still wearing her pajamas instead of her school uniform. The school contacted her family shortly afterward to inform her that they'd given the girl a uniform to wear for the day, and Catherine would then travel back to the school to drop off her school shoes. No one is certain why Catherine's strange behavior that morning didn't cause alarm, since she was well known among the school staff. But whatever the case may be, Catherine then left the school and went to a Target store at St. Mary's Shopping Village, where she was captured on CCTV surveillance footage. At the store, she bought a few items of clothing for the girls, after which she went home where she started cooking. No one knows what happened to Catherine during the next few hours, as she was never seen again. What is known is that she contacted both of her parents and her 2 brothers that morning, and they reported that nothing seemed out of the ordinary during the phone calls. They did find it strange that she contacted all of her family members, one after another, on that same morning, though. When her husband, Michael Bryan, was contacted by the school to inform him that Catherine hadn't fetched their daughters, he knew something was wrong, and at the house, he found the bag of clothing that she'd bought earlier in the day sitting in the living room. He noticed that a black backpack and a handmade quilt that had been given to Catherine by her aunt were the only things missing from the house. He could find no sign of her, and he decided to report her as missing. Michael informed investigators that Catherine had spent some time in a mental health facility in 2013 after she suffered a severe psychotic episode stemming from depression, and he feared that she may be going through a similar situation. He added that she had also been suffering from stress and depression in the months before she mysteriously disappeared, and that he was very concerned for her well-being. She had taken medication in the past which helped, but she slowly started reducing the amount of medication she was taking until she got pregnant, after which she stopped taking it completely. A thorough investigation was conducted during which Catherine's bank account and Medicare account were monitored, but neither saw any activity. Investigators also checked interstate records in case Catherine decided to change her name, but this also yielded no results. Michael has struggled to explain Catherine's disappearance since he strongly believes that she would never abandon her 2 children, who were the most important people in her life, and he has serious doubts that she's still alive, since she would have made contact with her family otherwise. Catherine's mother echoed this opinion and stated that she felt that Catherine was let down by the mental health professionals who treated her in the past, since they promised to follow up to see how she was doing in the months after her treatment was complete, but this was never done. Michael conducted his own search of the walking trails that can be found in the Blue Mountains, but he could find no trace of Catherine, and stated that there are too many areas where someone could drop off the trail never to be seen again. An inquest was held in 2017, during which a coroner stated that they believed Catherine was no longer alive, though they were obviously unable to ascertain how she had lost her life, since she's never been found. Although it's assumed that Catherine is no longer alive, her mysterious disappearance remains unsolved, and until some of the unanswered questions in her case are answered, it's unlikely that her family will ever know what really happened to her. Having a loved one go missing must be a harrowing experience that most of us will never have to endure. But when someone goes missing in a foreign country, it must be even harder since they are so far away from home, leaving those who are searching for them feeling powerless. There must be a massive sense of relief when this person is finally able to make contact, revealing that they're safe and well. But in the case of 22-year-old Angie Chong Sung Yi from Malaysia, her family believes that not all is what it seems, after she reassured them that she wasn't in any kind of danger. Angie's mother, Chi Choi Wan, decided to open a missing person report with the Malaysian embassy in Bangkok, Thailand, on the 2nd of June 2023, after she had not heard from her for 24 hours. Angie had traveled to Chiang Mai in Thailand alone and was keeping in contact with her mother, but then suddenly stopped responding to WhatsApp messages, causing her family great concern. Angie's brother told investigators that he was completely unaware that she had traveled to Thailand and only found out that she had done so after the fact. When an investigation into Angie's disappearance was launched, no one could have foreseen the strange set of circumstances that was to follow. Investigators raced to find CCTV security footage of Angie in order to track her last known movements, and that almost immediately succeeded in doing so. They found security footage in which Angie can be seen walking with the woman dressed in white clothing, though the woman has not yet been identified. Investigators then found that the missing woman had traveled to a river pier close to the border between Thailand and Myanmar on the 29th of May, and then checked into a nearby hotel. The next day, she paid a woman about $14 to give her a ride to a pier near the Ko Chang border on her motorbike. The woman obliged and dropped her off, but was unable to tell investigators whether she had planned to cross the border or if she had then done so. When nothing further was heard from Angie by the 6th of June, Angie's mother and brother traveled to Chiang Mai, where they held a meeting with Thai investigators to get all the details in the case up to that point. She revealed that she was concerned for Angie's safety, since many people have been lured to Bangkok by promises for work, only to find out that they've been targeted by scam artists, who then either steal their money and possessions or force them to work in terrible conditions. Many of the people who end up in this situation are unable to return to their home countries, as their passports are taken from them, and only returned after their families pay a ransom to their so-called employers. But then, Angie's case took a strange and unexpected turn. On the 7th of June, 3 videos were posted to a Facebook account that had only just been created, and strangely they featured Angie, though the Facebook account was named Mo Ai. Even stranger was the fact that the videos were taken on a phone camera, which was recording videos playing on a different phone, which understandably caused everyone who viewed them to become suspicious. Many people asked why the videos weren't simply uploaded from the original phone, while others wondered why Angie wouldn't just post them to her own account instead, if there was really nothing untoward going on. In the first of the videos, Angie can be seen talking to the camera, with a bowl of food sitting on a table in front of her. She then goes on to reassure friends, family, and even unknown individuals on the internet that she's extremely healthy and that everyone can stop worrying and searching for her. This clip lasted a mere 34 seconds. In the second video, which was 23 seconds long, she stated that she was safe and working, but didn't mention where exactly. She does mention that she's in a safe environment, and then asks investigators to leave the woman who gave her a ride to the border alone, as she has no knowledge of Angie's whereabouts. But very few people were convinced that Angie was being sincere in the footage. They pointed out that her eyes seemed to shift from the camera at times while she was talking, and suggested that she was reading a pre-written statement rather than speaking for herself. In the third clip, she can be seen standing in what looks like a store, smiling, and making a peace sign with her fingers. After viewing the footage, investigators reiterated that they would continue to look for clues, and that they were committed to tracking Angie down. In the meantime, Angie's mother has opened a case with the Mae Sai police, as the tourism police do not have the authority to place anyone under arrest. It's often the case that when someone goes missing, foul play is immediately suspected, and it's only later on in the investigation that it comes to light that this isn't the case, as they either had an accident or became confused and couldn't find their way home. This is seemingly what happened in the missing person case involving Natarn Ald, a 38-year-old woman who went missing from Brisbane in Australia in 2020. The last known contact with Natarn was on the 14th of December, when she told a friend of hers that she was going to a store to buy cigarettes. She was then captured by CCTV security cameras as she walked along Redland Bay Road, and it was noted by investigators that she was alone at the time. Further CCTV footage shows her inside a BP service station, where she bought a cup of coffee and some food before leaving the building. For the next 2 months, investigators did everything they could to track Natarn down, but there were no eyewitnesses and no further CCTV footage, which they found strange, as she was clearly walking around the area on the night that she disappeared, and chances were good that she would have been picked up by security cameras. But this simply wasn't the case. Natarn's bank account and social media accounts were monitored in case they showed any activity that could lead investigators to her whereabouts, but they've been quiet since the day she disappeared. When the missing woman's phone was tracked, it was confirmed that she still had it with her while she was seen walking on Redland Bay Road, and it hadn't moved from that location for at least 40 minutes. Following this, the phone traveled to the northerly side of Brisbane, and they found no reason to believe that she didn't have her phone with her the entire time. This gave them a good idea of where she may have ended up, but still no trace of Natern could be found. When it came to light that she was in the habit of rummaging through charity bins, investigators hit upon a new theory that's now considered by most to be correct. Since her phone was stationary for at least 40 minutes before moving again, they believe she may have fallen asleep during that time. But while this theory brings hope that she will eventually be found, it may point to a tragic ending to this mystery. It's been suggested that Natern was rummaging through one of the charity bins in the area when she fell asleep, and that the bin was picked up by a trash truck, the driver being unaware that there was someone asleep inside. Investigators stated that this theory makes sense, since Natern's phone followed the exact route that the truck does when traveling back to Northgate, where commercial and industrial waste is dropped off at a dump site. A search was also conducted of bushland, close to an industrial site in Nudgee, but no trace of Natern was found. Police divers also looked for her in Nudgee Creek, but once again, no further clues were found. Following the new revelation that Natern may have been inadvertently picked up by a trash truck, searchers scoured several trash truck drop-off points in hopes that she or her remains would be located, but again, this yielded no results, and Natern remains missing to this day, with no indication of whether she's still alive or not. During the time that she's been missing, Natern has failed to attend family visits and birthdays, leading to further speculation that she may have come to some sort of harm, though foul play is not expected in her disappearance. Investigators have stated that they're continuing to look for clues, such as pieces of Natern's clothing, her handbag, purse, or her cell phone, as these may provide vital clues in bringing her case to a close. But it's been nearly 3 years since she went missing, and with every passing month, it becomes ever more unlikely that her family will receive answers as to what really happened to her. Natern's daughter has repeatedly posted to social media to ask anyone who saw her that night or knew where she may have ended up after being spotted by security cameras to come forward, but this has yielded no results so far. At present, Natern's case remains unsolved, but there's only a very slim chance that it'll ever reach a conclusion, as the only thing investigators have to go on is mere speculation. It's a sad reality that criminals look to take advantage of people who are more naive than they are, as they're easy targets and tend to trust the people around them. This may have been what led to the disappearance of Rory MacDonald, a 59-year-old man who disappeared from Vernon in British Columbia, Canada, in May of 2022. Rory's family states that his life motto was "Everyone is good people," and that he had great faith in the kindness of other people. But it's possible that this outlook on life may have contributed to his disappearance, as he was very trusting, though this is mere speculation. Rory's former sister-in-law, Adele, has stated that he was the type of person who would do anything to help someone out, even if that meant he would be left in a tough spot. She describes him as a big teddy bear of a man, and that she can't think of why anyone would want to harm him. Unfortunately, the Royal Mounted Canadian Police has suggested that this is very likely the case, as they strongly suspect that he's fallen victim to foul play, though not many details about their investigation have been made public. Adele also told investigators that she last saw him when they were together in the 3300 block of 35th Avenue, while they were in the process of loading a few of his personal belongings into a car. Adele was planning to drive Rory to Kamloops the following day, where he intended to visit his mother, but while they were loading his belongings into the car, he received a phone call and walked away, and that was the last time she had any contact with him. When no one heard anything further from Rory for the next 2 days, they became concerned, as he was in the habit of staying in touch, and they decided to open a missing person case with the Royal Mounted Police. Despite not revealing much about the case, investigators have stated that they found evidence that a crime had been committed in North Okanagan, and that it involves 2 vehicles that have been secured, but the exact location of said crime has been withheld from the public. They have released images of the 2 cars, one being a 2004 gray Honda Accord, and the other being a 2002 Volkswagen Passat, which has been spray painted black. The vehicle's number plates have not been made public. Investigators have also released a CCTV image, which is believed to be the last time that Rory was seen. The footage shows him sitting in a chair outside of a hotel, but it isn't known whether he was merely resting in that spot or if he ever entered the building. The location of the hotel has also not been made public. No details are available on how the 2 vehicles are connected to Rory's disappearance, but investigators have asked anyone who saw the two cars in the area over North Okanagan between the 16th and 17th of May, 2021 to come forward, as this information may be crucial in solving the mystery of Rory's whereabouts. They've also remained tight-lipped about where the vehicles were found and what the drivers of the vehicles were suspected of doing, but they've made it clear that they suspect criminality to be involved in Rory's strange disappearance. They added that they don't believe Rory's case to be a crime of opportunity, but that the criminals involved specifically targeted him, though it isn't certain what their motives may have been. Rory's family has been informed that following evidence that's been gathered in his case, there's a very likely chance that he's no longer alive, though those who are close to him still hold out hope that this isn't the case. Investigators and Rory's family have asked anyone with information on the two cars involved in the disappearance, or who knows where Rory might be, to come forward, adding that this would be the right thing to do. Rory is described as weighing around 230 pounds and standing 6 foot 5 inches tall. He has short white hair and at the time that he went missing had a mustache and a goatee. He can also be recognized by a tattoo of a unicorn on his left bicep. In the CCTV footage from the hotel, which is the last time that Rory was seen, he's wearing a black t-shirt containing a Volcom Storm logo on the front side. He's also wearing blue jeans that are either capri style or rolled up just below his knees and dark shoes. In the footage, he can be seen carrying a black backpack. If you have any information on Rory's case, you're asked to contact the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at 250-545-7171. Alternatively, you can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Having someone you know and love go missing can be a harrowing and stressful experience, but it must be even more unsettling to find out that an entire town has vanished without a trace, and it's not as uncommon as one might think. The most famous example of this must be the Roanoke colony, which disappeared in August of 1590. It's a strange tale that's left us baffled for centuries, and it's unlikely that we will ever find further answers to solve the mystery. It all began when a group of settlers, about 115 altogether, relocated from England to Roanoke Island in the US. After establishing their community, their leader, John White, decided that he would make his way back to England in order to restock the colony's dwindling supplies. He would, however, get stuck in England thanks to the war between Spain and England, and he would only make his way back to Roanoke 3 years later. But upon his arrival, he was dismayed at what he found. The entire colony had disappeared without a trace, and the only clue that he could find was the word Croatoan, which had been carved into a wooden post. Despite searching high and low, neither White nor the authorities ever found any trace of the colony's inhabitants, and we can only speculate as to what may have happened. There are theories that a tribe living on the island of Croatoan may have attacked the colony, and either ended everyone's lives or taken them back to the island with them. Others believe that the colony members may have become desperate when White didn't return, and so they decided to sail back to England but never made it back. This is a well-known case that pretty much everyone agrees will never make any further progress. But there is another similar mystery that also needs solving, which is the disappearance of the town of Urkhammer, which was situated in Iowa. We're uncertain just how well known the town of Urkhammer was, since there's no record of when the town was established or who may have lived there. But an article that was published in the Clarion Sun-Telegraph in 1929 assures us that it really did exist, despite the doubts of many who have heard the tale. The article reported that a pilot flew over the town. The town seemed completely deserted. One would imagine that he saw empty buildings, cars that had been abandoned by their owners, and businesses that had been boarded up, but this wasn't the case. The areas where buildings once stood were now completely empty, with no sign that anyone had ever built there. Where there should have been roads, there was nothing but open land and fields, and it was as if the entire town had been swallowed up into nothingness, or as if it was never really there to begin with. But as strange as that sounds, things were about to get a whole lot weirder. A man who was passing through the area decided to stop over in Urkhammer just a week after the aerial photographs were taken. But he was even more unsuccessful than the pilot was. The man arrived in Urkhammer just in time, as his car was about to run out of gas. He stopped at a gas station in town and filled his gas tank, thankful that he could continue on with his journey. But as soon as he drove out of town, he would also fall victim to the strangeness of Urkhammer. He had only driven 2 miles out of town when his car began to sputter, and eventually it came to a full stop after it had run out of gas. He made up his mind to confront the owner of the gas station, who had clearly ripped him off, putting in no gas while gladly accepting the man's money. He had no choice but to walk the 2 miles back to town, but after 2 hours of retracing his steps, he had still not made it back to town, despite being able to see some of the buildings in the distance, which he found very strange and frustrating. Another motorist eventually passed him on the road, and recognizing that he may be in trouble, shared some of the gas from his car's tank, and the man was free to go on his way. But the ordeal had such a lasting impact on him that he needed psychiatric care and would end up receiving treatment at a sanatorium for a short while. Another version of this tale states that the traveler actually stopped outside of Urkhammer, where he found the gas station to be desolate and abandoned. He stated that it seemed as though the station and the nearby shops had been abandoned for a long time with no signs of life anywhere. He decided to report the matter to the people of Urkhammer, which was about 3 miles away according to the signs next to the road. But no matter how far or fast he drove, he could never find the town. He had covered about 4 miles but never saw any indication that he was getting closer to the town, and he was rapidly running out of gas. He decided to return to the gas station, but he was overwhelmed by a feeling of loss, and he became certain that the town had suffered some terrible fate. Many people have attempted to solve this mystery by looking for the town, and some have even claimed that they were able to find it, but reported that the streets were completely empty, as was the case with the motorist, not a single soul in sight. Then there's the tale of a group of farm families that was moving from Illinois to California, and along their route, they decided to stop outside of Urkhammer to set up camp. They were low on supplies, and so 2 men from the group were told to head into town for fresh stock. But they returned empty-handed with a strange story. They claimed they had reached the town, but when they attempted to walk into the general store, they found that their feet passed right through the building's front steps, as if it were a hologram. Unwilling to believe their fantastical tale, a larger group was sent to town, but they encountered the same problem, and the group, now thoroughly unsettled, decided to move on after reporting the strange incident to the Iowa State Police, who immediately investigated. They went to Urkhammer's sheriff's office, but when they attempted to open the door, their hands passed right through, just as had happened to the previous group. Many believe the tale of Urkhammer to be a complete fabrication, but a woman wrote to the editor of the Clarion Sun-Telegraph to say that she worked as a school teacher in Urkhammer and she was unimpressed with the strange tale about the town. But despite this, the town has still never been found, and it's unlikely that we will ever know what happened to Urkhammer or its inhabitants. That is, if it ever existed in the first place. People have been known to go missing in the blink of an eye, with people reporting seeing someone right in front of them and they turn away for a few seconds only to find that the person they were looking at has completely disappeared when they look back, never to be found. These cases are almost impossible to explain, let alone solve, and it all becomes all the more frustrating when no sign of the missing person is ever found. Usually, investigators would come across at least some of their belongings like a wallet, a phone, or an item of their clothing. But there have been many reported cases where not a single clue was left behind. What must be even more disconcerting and confusing, however, is if someone disappears while they're in full view of onlookers, seemingly blinking out of existence with no explanation or indication of what had happened. This is exactly what happened in the strange disappearance of David Lang, a farmer who lived near Gallatin, Tennessee in 1880. David was married to Emma, and they had 2 children, namely George, who was 8 years old, and Sarah, who was 11 at the time. The only other occupants on the farm were the family's servants, but they would receive visits from friends very often. And it's this fact that makes this story so strange, since it wasn't just David's family who witnessed a very bizarre incident, but their friends as well. On the 23rd of September of that year, David was relaxing on his farmhouse's porch since it was a scorching hot summer. George and Sarah were playing on the lawn in front of the house while Emma was inside. Given the unrelenting heat, George became concerned that his horses may be affected, and he decided to move them to a shadier area, just as Emma came walking out of the house onto the porch. At the same time, they noticed that Judge August Peck, who was a friend of the family, was approaching the farm on his horse-drawn buggy, together with his brother-in-law, and the two children became excited, since Peck usually arrived with a few presents. David also noticed the buggy, and after finishing his task, he turned back to the house, giving a wave to his friend as he did so. But then something truly bizarre and inexplicable happened that has not been explained to this day. Most reports say that David took about 6 steps back towards the house when his foot seemed to strike something on the ground that caused him to stumble and fall, which was obviously worrisome to the onlookers. But what caused them real concern was the fact that as he hit the ground, he completely disappeared into thin air in full view of everyone present. Emma let out a scream, and everyone ran over to the spot where they'd last seen David, but there was nothing and no one to be seen. At first, they thought he might be playing a prank on them, and that he was hidden behind something in the field, but despite searching every inch of the area where David was, they were unable to find him. By now, Emma and the children were in a state of panic, and they alerted their neighbors who arrived at the farm in quick time to aid in the search. The entire family searched multiple times, with people stomping their feet on the ground in an effort to find a crevice or a hole that David may have fallen into, but to no avail. Fearing that something might happen to one of the children, Emma called for the county surveyor to check the farm's grounds, but he too was unable to find anything wrong, stating that the farm's grounds were good and solid and that there were no areas that were deemed dangerous. In fact, he found that bedrock ran just a few feet under the field, and so it could have been impossible for a cave-in to occur that would have allowed David to be swallowed whole. Emma became sick with worry and confusion, and she eventually spent most of her time sick in bed. When the following year rolled around, George and Sarah noticed that the grass in the area where David went missing was dying, in contrast to the surrounding field. The yellowing grass formed a circle of about 15 feet around the area. Before they could report the strange find to their mother, though, they heard David's voice calling for help, though he was nowhere to be seen, and it seemed as though he was calling from another dimension. This would happen on a few more occasions, but as time went by, David's calls for help grew even fainter, and eventually they stopped completely. George noticed that the horses refused to go anywhere near the circle of yellowed grass, and on one occasion, he and Sarah decided to conduct an experiment. They caught a cricket and threw it into the strange patch of grass. The cricket immediately stopped chirping and hopped out of the circle where it started chirping again. They also noticed that no other insects or animals ever entered the circle, as if they were avoiding it at all costs. Emma never got over the disappearance of her husband, and she eventually decided to relocate, allowing Judge Peck to rent the farm out, as long as the field where David was last seen was left as it was until she passed away. It's impossible to ascertain what really happened to David, and hence there are many theories on the subject, one of which is that he somehow crossed paths with a doorway to another dimension, which he then fell into. Some people think that David was abducted by extraterrestrials, but this wouldn't explain why his family was able to hear his voice for months after he disappeared. Then there are those who believe that the entire story is a piece of fiction, but one man named Stuart Palmer strongly disagrees. Palmer received a first-hand account of the event from Sarah Lang, David's daughter, and she would add that she made contact with a spiritual medium after her mother passed away, and she was told that her mother was also still searching for David in the afterlife. One last interesting detail that she added was that after the farm was sold, the new owner wanted to have the field where David disappeared plowed, but no matter how many times he did so, the circle of grass would always grow back in the exact same spot. Many parents find it hard when their children head off to college, as it is in most cases the first time that their child will be living away from home. But it must be absolutely devastating to find out that one of your children has gone missing while away from college, which is what happened to a woman named Mary Carpenter in Denton, Texas. Mary was born in Texarkana, Texas in 1927, and she showed remarkable development as a baby, and she started walking much earlier than expected, and her mother would have to resort to telling her that large dogs patrolled the streets outside their house, just to keep her from leaving their yard unsupervised. At 3 years old, she became ill with influenza, and given the state of medicine at the time, she was left to fight through the illness by herself, and when she finally got better, doctors found that the illness had caused an infection in her right hip, and this had a lasting effect, as one of her legs was now shorter than the other. Although she was a smart girl, Virginia never excelled at school because of her limp. She was rather shy and reserved, but she did try out for the majorettes, and against everyone's expectation, she made the squad. She would eventually graduate from Arkansas High in 1944, after which she continued her education at the University of Arkansas, after she decided that she wanted to pursue a career as a journalist. But after a year of studying, she decided to alter her course towards becoming a lab technician. But before she could do so, her mother fell ill, and she fell in love with a man named Mac, who worked at the hospital where her mother was being cared for. They became engaged, but Virginia would end the relationship shortly before the wedding, as their personalities started to clash. She then attended Texarkana Junior College, after which she planned to move to the Texas State College for Women in Denton. When the day arrived for Virginia to leave for college on the 1st of June 1948, Virginia's mother asked if she could drive her to the campus in her car, but Virginia said that she would rather take the train, and she made it to the train station just in time. 6 hours later, she had arrived in Denton, and she, along with the woman called Marjorie Webster, who she met on the train, hailed a taxi that was being driven by a man named Edgar Zachary. Zachary dropped Marjorie off at the Fitzgerald dorms, but Virginia realized that she left her suitcase at the train station, and she paid Zachary 75 cents to take her back to collect it. Marjorie offered to accompany her, but Virginia insisted that she go alone. Upon arrival back at the station, though, she was unable to find her luggage, and she was told by an employee named Mr. Buttrell that it would be arriving on a later train. Zachary offered to pick the luggage up for her the next morning, and Virginia agreed, signing the back of the claim ticket so that he could do so. From here, all we have to go on are witness statements, the first being from Zachary, who told investigators that he drove Virginia to Brackenridge Hall at the college, and as they arrived, he noticed a light-colored convertible parked outside. He added that Virginia then got out of the taxi and walked over to the convertible, where she had a conversation with the two men who were standing next to it. When asked to describe the men, he told investigators that one was tall and the other was short and stocky. He got the impression that Virginia and the two men knew each other, and he left the luggage that she did have with her on the curb, since the two men had offered to carry it for her. He then got back into his taxi and drove away. Some reports would later state that a guard at the dorm saw Virginia getting into the convertible with the two men, but police investigators later refuted this claim. Zachary would return the next day with Virginia's trunk, and he left it on the curb as she asked, but 2 days later, it was still in the same spot, and it was eventually taken to the college's office. It wasn't until 3 days later, when Kenny Branham, who was Virginia's boyfriend at the time, failed to get a hold of her, that anyone started to suspect that something was wrong. Branham contacted Virginia's mother to tell her that he couldn't get in touch with her, and Mrs. Carpenter started to become concerned. She contacted the college to get more details, but she was told that Virginia never enrolled for her classes, and so she decided to contact Virginia's friends to hear if they had seen her, but to no avail. She then reported Virginia as missing to the Denton Police Department, but she was told to go to bed and that they would take a look at the case the following day. Mrs. Carpenter, however, decided to travel to Denton with her friend Lucille Bailey, and they were soon joined by other members of their family and some of Virginia's friends. Searches were carried out by airplanes and boats. The nearby wooded areas were searched by foot, as were any storm drains, wells, outbuildings, and rural areas, but no one was able to find any trace of Virginia. Drivers of light-colored convertibles were questioned, but investigators came up empty-handed, and it started to feel as though Virginia had disappeared into thin air. Farmers and hunters in the area were informed of Virginia's disappearance and told to be on the lookout for any shallow graves, and Virginia's photo was sent to police departments all over Texas. When her trunk that had been delivered to the campus was searched, it offered no clues as to where she may be, and a reward of $1,368 was offered for any information leading to her whereabouts. Zachary agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed, and investigators were satisfied that he wasn't involved in her disappearance. But it would then come to light that Virginia did indeed know someone who owned a cream-colored convertible, but there was no evidence tying them to the case. A few small leads came in, and they were all followed up on, but nothing came of it, and Virginia remained missing. A gas station attendant in Aubrey, Texas, contacted the police to report that he had seen Virginia sitting in a yellow convertible with two men and another woman 2 days after she had disappeared, but the car was never tracked down. Another sighting came from a DeQueen bus station ticket attendant, who stated that she saw Virginia at the station where she nervously waited for someone while asking about hotels in the area. Investigators showed her Virginia's photo, and she confirmed that that was the woman she saw. She eventually met up with a man of around 25 years old, and they left the bus station together. But just a few minutes after they had left, the woman received a phone call from someone asking for Virginia Carpenter. Investigators contacted hotels in the area, but they were never able to find anyone who had seen Virginia. And later, the witness from the bus station stated that she was unsure if she really did recognize Virginia from the photo that was shown to her. A few more sightings were reported, but none were of any use to investigators, and Virginia's case grew cold. After 7 years of investigation, it was decided that she be legally declared deceased. In 1959, investigators found a wooden box that contained the remains of a female with the same deformity in her leg that Virginia had, but after being examined in Austin, they were found to belong to someone else after the dental records came back as a negative match. 39 years later, a man came forward to tell investigators that he had information on Virginia's case. He said that her life had been ended and that he knew who the culprit was, as well as where she had been buried, which was a location on the college's grounds. The area was excavated, but all that was found was a rubber boot and a glove, neither of which belonged to Virginia, and to this day, she has still not been found. Many people believe that Virginia simply decided to start a new life somewhere else, but most believe that she wouldn't just disappear of her own free will, leaving her mother with no answers. Other theories include suggestions that she somehow hit her head, causing her to develop amnesia, and this is why she never found her way home. The prevailing theory, though, is that she was kidnapped by someone at the campus, possibly the driver of the convertible, and that foul play was involved. As with many of these types of cases, this is all mere speculation, and we may never learn what Virginia's fate truly was. It's often the case that someone acts out of character in the days or weeks leading up to their disappearance. Sometimes this is caused by stressful circumstances in their daily lives, work pressure, or trouble with their relationship, and it's often cited as a major contributor in their cases. This type of behavior was also noted as important in the bizarre disappearance of a woman called Patricia Meehan. Patricia grew up in Pittsburgh, where she was born in 1951, and she had an unremarkable childhood. After graduating from high school, she would move to Oklahoma City, where she attended college as she was interested in working as a daycare professional. She dropped out of college though, after which she started working as a ranch hand in Bozeman, Montana. In 1989 though, Patricia decided that she wanted to move back to Pittsburgh, and she contacted her father to tell him about her plans. She said that she found the work in Bozeman to be too stressful, but she didn't go into any further detail. Her landlord would also tell investigators that she'd been acting out of character the last time that he saw her, stating that while she was usually a quiet and shy person, on that occasion she seemed hyperactive, and although he thought it to be strange, he didn't think too much of it. A day after talking to her father, Patricia was driving along northwest on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana, when she seemingly lost control of her car and veered across the road violently, nearly hitting a car containing a woman named Peggy Bueller and her father. Unfortunately, she failed to avoid the collision with the car behind them, which was being driven by Carol Heights, a police dispatcher, but luckily no one came to any harm as the result of the accident. After witnessing the collision, Peggy and her father pulled over in case they needed to provide details to the police, and as Carol exited her car, she saw that Patricia was in the process of getting out of hers as well. But she noticed that Patricia seemed to be dazed, seemingly not realizing that there were other people present. Everyone expected Patricia to wait by her car until the police arrived, but to their surprise, she walked to a nearby fence, climbed over it, and continued walking into a nearby field, after giving only a passing glance to her wrecked car. Peggy decided to contact the police, and by the time they arrived at the scene, Patricia had still not returned. It became a matter of urgency since Patricia was now a suspect that had fled from the scene of an accident, and her car's license plate was checked. Investigators started a search of the field into which she had disappeared, but their efforts were in vain as Patricia was nowhere to be found, despite following her footprints into nearby bushes where they disappeared. The following day, Patricia's family traveled to the scene of the accident to aid in the search by handing out flyers containing Patricia's photo, and searching the surrounding area as thoroughly as they could with the help of police search teams. Volunteers from the surrounding community also helped with the search efforts, which were being conducted not only on foot, but also with the help of ATVs, helicopters, and officers on horseback. But again, their efforts proved fruitless. Patricia's family and the investigators were at a loss as to why she was driving on this road, since it's over 400 miles from her hometown of Bozeman, and there had been no indication from her that she would be traveling this far. The best that anyone could do was speculate, and it was theorized that she may have walked to another road and hitchhiked out of the area before the searches were started. Another possibility is that she hid inside a hay delivery truck that had been parked nearby, and she either left the town in the truck or later snuck out and hitchhiked somewhere else. Strangely, no one other than the motorists involved in the accident saw Patricia in the hours after the crash, which is truly inexplicable. However, soon after news of her disappearance broke, investigators were inundated with calls from people who claimed to have seen her. Literally thousands of leads came in, one of which came from a police officer in Laverne, Minnesota, who reported seeing Patricia walking from a restaurant to another restaurant, ordering nothing but water at each one. Many people also reported seeing her at truck stops between Montana and Seattle, but investigators found that the woman in question had left the area by the time they responded, usually by hitchhiking. Strangely, Patricia was also spotted back in Bozeman by a waitress who stated that she was acting strangely. She demanded to be served quickly, and when the waitress asked her if she had to get back to work, she replied that she was simply going shopping, leaving the waitress wondering why she was in such a rush to finish her breakfast. Another waitress at the restaurant told investigators that Patricia was talking to herself, and that she seemed disconnected from the world around her. Despite insisting that she was in a hurry, she spent nearly 90 minutes in the restaurant, staring out of the window for most of that time. At one point, she was seen by a truck driver in Washington who said that she was walking next to the road and he stopped to offer her a ride, but she declined. Shortly after that, a woman also saw her and pulled off in her car to ask if she was all right. But the woman thought to be Patricia told her that she was looking for a phone since her car had broken down, but that she would be fine. Despite thousands of leads that were followed in Patricia's case, not a single further clue has ever been found, and she remains a missing person to this day. When we think of missing person cases, the last image that comes to mind is that of a 1700s pirate. But that's exactly what happened with Henry Avery, who went missing in 1695. It's believed that Avery was born in or near Devon, England in 1659, though some records date his birth as late as 1665. And being accustomed to the ocean thanks to his father who served in the Royal Navy, his first job was serving on a merchant vessel. Some records show that Avery then joined the Royal Navy, though this is disputed, but it's believed that it's during this time that he acquired a taste for piracy. He was soon given the ironic nickname Long John, which was the exact opposite of his physical appearance, since he was described as being of average height and overweight. After leaving the Royal Navy, Avery joined a ship which sought to find and imprison smugglers in the Caribbean Sea, and this is where his true nature came to the fore. While his captain was intoxicated one night, Avery, who served as a second mate, met with about 100 of his fellow sailors, and together they decided to mutiny after they'd grown ever more impatient with their wages not being paid. The mutiny was successful, and Avery was nominated as the ship's new captain. It was renamed from Charles II to Fancy, and the crew decided to set sail for Madagascar. Along the way, they teamed up with 2 other pirate ships, together making up a formidable force. En route to Madagascar, Avery and his companions looted 6 different vessels that they encountered on the open sea while displaying the Jolly Roger on his ship. He eventually arrived in Madagascar, where he went to work on assembling a fleet, and before long, he had an entourage of 6 ships that followed his command. And he didn't have to wait too long before his efforts paid off. In 1695, Avery and his crew encountered the Ganjai Sawai, a ship that belonged to the head of the Mughal Empire of India. But the fight for the Ganjai Sawai's treasures would not be an easy one, since it was being accompanied by a fleet of ships as protection, since it was carrying an unimaginable amount of valuables. One of the ships, the Fateh Mohammed, was the first to fall to Avery's men, and a total of $14 million in today's currency was lost to the pirates. But this was a drop in the bucket compared to what was contained inside the Ganjai Sawai, and Avery set sail in pursuit. Both ships were fitted with cannons, and an almighty battle broke out that lasted more than 2 hours, but Every's men managed to destroy the Ganjai Sawai's main sail, and the ship was quickly overrun by the pirates, earning Every the nickname Arch Pirate. When all was said and done, Every and his men sailed away with around $95 million worth of treasure, if converted to modern currency, and it was at the time considered to be one of the biggest pirate hauls ever recorded. The ship was found to contain jewelry, gold, silver, spices, silk, and gemstones, everything that a pirate could ever dream of. Each of the men got a fair share of the takings, ensuring that they would never have to work another day in their lives. But that's when things started going downhill. When the emperor, who owned the Ganjai Sawai, got wind of the attack and the amount of money that he had lost, he understandably became enraged and informed the British government that if Every and his men were not brought to justice, he would start imprisoning every British trader in India, and he followed through on his threat. The East India Company responded by placing a $1,000 bounty on the heads of each of Every's men, and the British government added another 500 to that total. But search as they might, Every and his men were long gone, reportedly having sailed to the Caribbean, where they all went their separate ways. It's believed that Every set sail for Rhode Island, after which he traveled to Ireland, but this has never been confirmed. Captain William Kidd was tasked with tracking down the pirates, specifically Every, but he failed to do so, and in the end, he decided to abandon his old life for a life of piracy as well. The governor of Jamaica later reported that he was offered a substantial bribe in exchange for a royal pardon of the pirates, but he declined, and Every and his men remained wanted fugitives. In 1698, the British government decided that the pirates would be granted amnesty on the condition that they surrendered themselves to Captain Thomas Warren, but it was specifically mentioned that Every and Kidd were to be excluded, and that they were to be apprehended on sight. There were reports that Every eventually traveled back to England, where he intended to sell a cache of diamonds, but he was outfoxed by a swindler, and he was forced to live a life of poverty in order to keep his identity hidden from the authorities. Most of Every's 113-man crew managed to escape the long arm of the law, but 14 of his men were eventually apprehended, 6 of which were sentenced to be executed. Authorities received many reports that Every had been sighted in England over the years, but he was never apprehended. Following his enormous haul, many other men were inspired by Every, and they left their everyday lives for a life of piracy, believing that they too could stumble upon a great treasure that would secure their financial futures. Many people still consider Every to be the greatest pirate that ever lived, not only because of the treasure that he stole, but because he managed to evade the law for the rest of his life, and we can only speculate where he ended up and what he did with his ill-gotten gains. Jackson Brent Garcia was last seen by his cousin on the day after Christmas 2020. Without warning, he left the house and has not been seen or heard from since. Brent was 18 years old, living in Sumter County, South Carolina at the time of his mysterious disappearance. He was very close to his family, in particular his grandmother, who he lived with. He had ambitions of becoming a veterinarian and adored animals. Christmas Day of 2020 was like any other. The family came together at Brent's mother's house and enjoyed a typical celebration, including good food and gift giving. None of Brent's family noticed anything out of the ordinary about him, and had no idea this would be the last time any of them saw him. At the end of the visit, he left with his grandmother, Jean, but didn't return home with her. Instead, he went to visit a cousin. This wasn't too odd, but it was out of character for Brent to go somewhere without telling anyone. Brent and his cousin spent the evening playing games. At one point, his brother called and they chatted for a while. Then at 5:30 p.m., he received a call from his grandmother. She asked if he was going to be coming home for the night, and Brent assured her that he would be home soon. This was the last time that she heard from him. When Brent didn't return home, Jean tried to call him again but never got a response. But Brent's location was still known at this point. He didn't leave his cousin's home and instead apparently decided to stay the night there. This was now extremely out of character. It was very strange for him to not let his grandmother know where he was, let alone lie about his plans to come home. It was the evening of December 26th when Brent completely vanished. He and his cousin had taken the dog outside at around 7 p.m. After the dog was finished, Brent's cousin took the dog back inside, but Brent never followed. His cousin didn't actually see Brent leave the house, but when he went back to look for him, Brent had completely disappeared. Brent's mother reported him as a missing person a few days later. Sniffer dogs picked up his scent at a Family Dollar store on Route 15. This was roughly an hour-and-a-half walk from Brent's cousin's home, and nowhere near his grandmother's. A search of the surrounding area turned up no clues, though. Brent's family has spent the last 2.5 years searching for answers and helping to raise awareness of other missing person cases in the local area. A $10,000 reward is offered for information leading to Brent. Anyone with information can contact the Sumter County Sheriff's Office at 803-436-2000. May of 2023 marks 6 months since Grady Bruce Benson disappeared from his home in Cotton County, Oklahoma. The 69-year-old man vanished without a trace after bringing dinner to his son and telling him that he wouldn't be out to work the next day. A full day passed before anybody realized Bruce was missing. After searching the home, they found nothing that could explain what had happened. Bruce was a farmer who lived on his property just outside of the town of Randlet. He lived with his wife of 50 years, Maxine, and saw their only child, a son named Grady, often as he also worked on the farm. According to Maxine, he lived his whole life within a mile of his home. On November 9th, 2023, Bruce and Maxine spent the day together. That evening, they went with friends to eat out at a fish restaurant in Waurika. At the end of the meal, the couple went their separate ways. Maxine was going on a long-planned girls' trip to Montana. Bruce was last seen by his son that night. He brought dinner out to his son, who was changing a tire on the plow in the field. They then both returned to the barn, where Bruce helped Grady get air into some tires. Grady left the barn and returned shortly afterward to find his father by his pickup truck. Bruce told Grady that he had a bit of a cough and he likely wouldn't be coming out to the fields the next day. He told Grady not to worry about it. The last time Grady saw Bruce was about 8 p.m. The next day, Bruce didn't come out into the fields, but Grady didn't think anything of it. Maxine also didn't think anything of her unanswered text messages. Bruce wasn't much of a texter, but it was concerning when he didn't reply to her messages. Maxine called Grady, asking him to check on his father. He visited the house on November 8th and found nothing out of place. The house was all locked up and the garage door was closed. All of Grady's vehicles were where they were meant to be. Thinking his father was just out, Grady left and returned after lunch, but nothing had been moved. Bruce's phone, wallet, car keys, and jacket were all found in the truck, which was left unlocked. That was also strange, as Bruce always left the vehicle locked. Maxine believes he only had a few pocket knives, chapstick, and a set of keys to her car when he vanished. She also believes he didn't make it home that night, as none of the food in the house had been eaten. Police believe Bruce's disappearance is suspicious. He has no known health issues and no enemies. What happened to him will likely remain a mystery until he's found. There's a $25,000 reward per information leading to Bruce's location. Any information can be passed to the Cotton County Sheriff's Office at 580-875-3383 or the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation at 405-848-6724. Andrew Dill disappeared without a trace from Birmingham, England in April of 2003. The exact circumstances of Andrew's disappearance are unclear, but his family has appealed for answers on the recent 20th anniversary of his vanishing. Andrew was 38 years old at the time of his disappearance and lived in Birmingham's city center. He's described as having very strong family connections, and it was very unlike him to disappear without telling anyone his location. The last confirmed sighting was at Birmingham New Street train station on the evening of April 28, 2003. He'd caught a train home from Hednesford in Staffordshire. The exact timings aren't known, but the West Midlands police note that he arrived in Birmingham in the late evening. None of Andrew's family or friends would see him again. Over the next couple of days, there were some reported sightings in Birmingham city center, and his loved ones received text messages from Andrew's phone. All contact suddenly stopped on May 20th, and Andrew was eventually reported missing. The police were able to determine that Andrew's phone had stayed in the Birmingham area in the weeks after he was last seen, but they weren't able to trace it to an exact location. That phone still hasn't been found. The contents of the text messages have never been revealed, but the police said in a statement that Andrew's phone may have been in someone else's possession after April 28th. It's possible that what happened to Andrew had already happened when his loved ones were receiving text messages. The police believe that the phone may be key to finding out what happened to Andrew. It was a light blue Nokia 3310 with dark blue trim and an orange network logo. If somebody did have Andrew's phone after his disappearance, finding out who that was could be the clue to finally solving this missing person case. His family is hopeful that he may still be alive and appealed for information. Andrew had 3 children when he vanished and has missed important milestones in their lives and the lives of other family members. Anyone with information can contact the Steelhouse Lane Police Station on 0121 626 8716 or Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. The last time Michael Farrell was seen, he was heading towards his cabin aboard a ferry en route to Wales, across the Irish Sea. When the ferry arrived in Pembroke, there was no sign of the 30-year-old father of 3. 28 years have passed since Michael disappeared, but his family is still hopeful that he may be alive, or that someone might be able to provide answers as to what happened to him. The father of 3 worked as a cinema manager. His work required him to start the film projector, and at 8:30 p.m. on September 19, 1994, he was doing just that. 2 hours later, he was supposed to start the next film for the evening, but that film went unplayed. At 10:30 p.m., the time the second film was supposed to start, one of Michael's coworkers spotted him heading towards his cabin. The cabin was located at the bottom of the ship. None of the crew working that day noticed anything out of the ordinary and said he was in good form when he was last seen. Meanwhile, one of the passengers had been searching for Michael to reclaim a newspaper that Michael had borrowed earlier in the day. When that passenger couldn't find Michael, a search began. The crew searched the ship from top to bottom multiple times before it arrived at Pembroke in Wales at 12:30 a.m. on September 20th. All of his belongings were still in his cabin, and there was nothing out of place aboard the ferry, but Michael was nowhere to be found. When the ferry arrived in Wales, cars were searched as they disembarked. Another detailed search of the ferry took place, but there was nowhere that Michael could have been hiding, or could have been hidden. The Coast Guard was informed, and a sea search took place. It also failed to turn up anything. Michael left behind 3 children. Almost 30 years on, he now has at least 1 granddaughter. His family is still hopeful that answers can be found. On the 25th anniversary of Michael's disappearance, his sister appealed directly to him. It's possible Michael avoided being spotted and decided to start a new life in Wales or elsewhere in Britain. It is, of course, possible that he went overboard, though, but there would have been no reason for Michael to be on deck at the time of his disappearance. That also wouldn't explain why he was heading down to his cabin when he should have been on duty in the cinema. During the 25th anniversary appeal, the Irish police revealed that they were following new lines of inquiry. Unfortunately, those don't appear to have led to Michael, but it seems there is still information about his location out there, waiting to be uncovered. Anyone with information can contact the Missing Person Charity at 116000. Gregory Keith Mann disappeared under suspicious circumstances after a night out with friends in May of 1997. Foul play is suspected in his case, but so far there aren't any theories as to what happened to him. Keith was last seen at 11:45 p.m. on May 10, 1997. He was a car salesman working at Rob Roberts Ford in Wichita Falls, Texas, a job he had held for 2 months. On the day of his disappearance, he worked an ordinary shift, selling 2 cars and earning some good commission that would be included in his next paycheck. He went home to the apartment he had recently moved into at Fountain Gate Apartments. Keith had moved in the previous month when the apartment became available early. His fiancée, Carrie, had recently graduated from university and would be moving in after a weekend of celebration with her parents. That evening, he spoke with Carrie on the phone before meeting up with 2 friends. Chris was his coworker at the car dealership, and Michelle was his girlfriend. The three were in a black Nissan Pathfinder that Chris had borrowed from the dealership. At the time, the dealership allowed salesmen to borrow demo cars, and Keith had actually borrowed a red Mustang demo car for the weekend. Over the next few hours, the three went to a number of locations, including a Fina gas station, where they bought alcohol, and a McDonald's. It's believed they also went mudding, getting the car dirty in the process. At around 11:30 p.m., they visited a car wash where Keith told his friends he needed to get home soon. He was going to meet someone 15 minutes past midnight, but he didn't tell Chris who he was going to meet or where. The friends dropped Keith off at 11:45 p.m. and watched him walk up the steps to the apartment building. They didn't see him go inside, but items bought at the gas station were found in the apartment. That afternoon, Carrie arrived at the apartment to find it empty. She didn't believe Keith had stayed there that night, and when she called his parents, they hadn't heard from him either. The Mustang Keith had borrowed for the weekend was found in the parking lot of St. Mark's United Methodist Church, a spot near Keith's family home that he would often use for parking. The car was locked, but the trunk was unlatched. It seemed like the car had been cleaned, and one of the panels in the trunk had been removed. The police believe foul play is likely in this strange disappearance, but it's not clear who would want to hurt Keith or why. The answer to that question may lie with whoever Keith met that night, but they've never come forward. Anyone with information on this case can contact the Wichita Falls Police Department at 940-761-7762. The disappearance of Christine Licorice McKechnie is one shrouded in mystery. There are few solid details about what happened to the folk singer, or where she might be today. Licorice was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in October of 1945. She was a talented singer-songwriter and just the right age to be drawn in by the flower child hippie music scene in the 1960s. When she was in her late teens, she moved to the US to marry her boyfriend, but the marriage never happened. Instead, she began dating another musician named Robin Williamson and joined the band known as the Incredible String Band. The ISB would be described as folk rock or early British psychedelia music and claimed the likes of Paul McCartney as fans. The band was having some success in the US and performed at Woodstock, but it was bumped from Friday's lineup of mostly folk bands to the electric music-focused Saturday. It didn't get the attention it might otherwise have had and was missing from the official film about the event. Despite the issues at Woodstock, the band continued for some years. Many of the members, including Licorice, joined the Church of Scientology, and many of the church's beliefs started to appear in song lyrics. What happened within the church is one of the biggest mysteries in this unsolved case. Some rumors state Licorice was the first of the ISB members to complete the first level of the church's training. Others say she became dissatisfied with Scientology and left. Licorice left the ISB in 1972 after breaking up with Williamson. She later dated a man named David Zeman, who was an ordained minister of the Church of Scientology in 1974. The relationship apparently didn't last, as she later married another musician named Brian Lambert. They divorced in the 1980s. Little else is known for certain about Licorice. It's believed she traveled to California and lived there for a few years. There are unverified reports that she worked as a waitress in the state. The last reported sighting of Licorice was in Arizona in 1990. She was apparently hitchhiking through the desert. After that, she apparently disappeared without a trace. Some believe Licorice is simply hiding in plain sight in California, living a normal life out of the limelight. There are some theories that she's trying to hide from the church, which doesn't take kindly to members leaving. The fact her family hasn't heard from her since the 80s, and that she hasn't claimed her royalty checks from the ISB is also worrying. Some believe she passed away while hitchhiking and may be a Jane Doe, waiting for identification. If alive today, Licorice would be 77 years old. Angel Monchito Cruz was once one of the most talented basketball players to never make it to the NBA. He had a successful career competing in Puerto Rico, where he was a local hero but vanished without a trace during his retirement. Angel grew up in New York, where he dedicated his life to perfecting his basketball skills. He was often one of the shortest players on the court, but that didn't seem to hinder him. His talent earned him a spot on the Indios de Canovanas team in Puerto Rico by the time he was 18. For the next 26 years, Angel impressed both on and off the court. He played point guard and had a career average of 14.8 points and 4.8 assists per game. His teammates described him as a natural leader and could sometimes be seen as a second coach on the court. During his career, he represented Puerto Rico on an international stage, including at the 1988 Olympics in Seoul. Off the court, he was described as laid back and always willing to stop for fans. He enjoyed traveling and collected pens from every city he visited. He was married 3 times and had 5 children. In 1993, Angel retired from the sport and moved back to New York. Adjusting to life after basketball was difficult for Angel, and he developed a problem with illegal substances. Not much information is known about Angel's life at this time, but by 1997, he seemed to be trying to make amends. He moved back to Puerto Rico, moving back in with his ex-wife for the first time in 5 years. He may have been trying to start a new career as a coach or manager, and was supportive of his son, Alvin, who looked set to follow in his father's footsteps and become a basketball star. But Angel was still struggling with addiction. It caused arguments between himself and his ex-wife, and Angel was concerned about his issues causing problems for Alvin. The last time his children saw him was in May of 1998. He had advised Alvin to sign for the Los Vaqueros basketball team, which he did. 2 weeks after signing, Alvin came home from practice with a twisted ankle. Angel left the house to get ice for Alvin's wound, but never came home. It's believed Angel traveled back to New York and may have signed up for a rehabilitation program, but never completed it. Some sources state that he was in touch with his parents for the next few years before disappearing entirely. Today, Angel's friends and family have no idea where he is or what happened to him. Elaine Can was a French singer who disappeared without a trace in 1990. The disappearance came 11 years after he released the album Whatever Happened to Elaine Z. Can, a question that has never been answered. Elaine disappeared on April 14, 1990. His partner Hubert dropped him off at a Paris metro station. He was in a rush and quickly disappeared into the station. It would only be 3 stops for Elaine to reach his apartment, but he never arrived. His stepsister and closest friend, Veronica, was alerted to his disappearance a few days later, but it wouldn't get much attention from the authorities. Elaine had lived a chaotic life up until that point, and it seemed likely that he would turn up, but he never would. Elaine had been recording music since he was a teenager. His music career was put on hold for his military service, and after he returned to civilian life, he realized he would need to make a change to get back into the limelight. He performed in late-night cabarets as an androgynous singer. It's somewhat unsurprising that after watching David Bowie in London, Elaine changed his art style once again to mimic the British singer. He produced 2 albums in this glam rock style and ended up in trouble with the police for producing songs that glamorized illegal substances. He would later reimagine himself again, this time producing music in the punk genre. All the while, Elaine was struggling with illegal substances himself and living an erratic lifestyle. He could not support himself with his music, but seemed to live life like a rock star. Veronica tried to look after him, but it wasn't an easy task. That was especially the case after Hubert came onto the scene. Hubert was as chaotic as Elaine and didn't help Elaine with his struggles. In particular, Veronica's husband didn't like Hubert and kicked both him and Elaine out of his home. Veronica tried to get her brother to stay, but he refused. It wasn't long after that Elaine disappeared. No trace of Elaine was ever found. Hubert's story changed multiple times, but he was cleared of any wrongdoing. Many suspect Elaine took his own life, though nobody saw this happen, and his body has never been found. The truth may never be uncovered, and we may never be able to answer the question of whatever happened to Elaine Z. Can. Actor Julian Sands disappeared without a trace while out hiking in San Gabriel Mountains in January of 2023. Almost 3 months later, he still hasn't been found. Most people recognize Julian today from his film and TV roles. He first found fame in the film A Room with a View and moved to Hollywood to continue his acting career. but in his hometown of Gargrave, England, he was known as much for his hiking as he was for his acting. Julian was an avid hiker. According to his brother, it was in the hills and mountains that he felt at home, and he would go hiking in the Yorkshire Dales whenever he was back in the UK. He had climbed mountains like the Matterhorn and Eiger. When he was back in Los Angeles, the Mount Baldy mountain range was his favorite place to be. Even in his 60s, Julian stayed active. In 2022, he walked an average of over 30 miles a day. Mount Baldy was a mountain he was familiar with, but heading up to the 10,000-foot mountain in the winter was extremely dangerous. It wasn't uncommon for search and rescue teams to be sent out to rescue even experienced hikers in the winter months. According to his friends, Julian would have seen that as a challenge though, and in January he left his LA home to try to summit the mountain. On the evening of January 13th, 2023, Julian's wife reported him as missing. A search began immediately, but poor weather conditions in Southern California meant ground searches had to be halted for safety reasons. Instead, search teams used technology that could trace electronic devices and credit cards, hoping to find some trace of Julian so they could focus their efforts when the weather cleared. It was discovered that Julian's phone pinged a number of times over the next 2 days before going silent. It had likely run out of battery. Ground searches resumed after a few weeks, but in March the area had to be completely closed due to risk of avalanches. So far, Julian still hasn't been found. Authorities say they might not get the answer they're hoping for in this missing person case, but they're dedicated to locating Julian and finding closure for his loved ones. Willie Copen has been described as Australia's first celebrity chef. He had a successful restaurant, a TV show, and a celebrity endorsement deal with Heinz. But in 1976, he vanished without a trace and hasn't been seen since. Willie was 46 years old at the time of his disappearance. He had grown up in Germany, where he had apprenticed at high-quality restaurants. In 1956, he moved to Melbourne, believing the cosmopolitan Australian city would be the perfect place to make a name for himself. While there, he met fellow German expat Karen and married her 2 years later. With Karen, Willie went from strength to strength. The couple opened their own restaurant called The Cuckoo, which was highly successful. Willie came into the spotlight first on the radio, but soon he had his own nightly cooking show, which aired before the evening news. From the outside, things looked great, but everything wasn't as it seemed. The Copens' marriage was in trouble. Both Willie and Karen were having affairs, and Karen had surrounded herself with people who weren't fond of Willie. He moved into a separate apartment at the bottom of his property and told Karen he wanted to sell the restaurant and move to a rural dairy farm. He was also drinking heavily. The last time Willie was seen before he vanished was in the early hours of the morning on Sunday, February 29th, 1976. The evening before, he had arrived at the restaurant extremely drunk and apparently ready for a fight. He threatened to fire a number of waitstaff and accused Karen of having an affair with a doctor and the doctor's girlfriend. The doctor in question, Bernard Butler, wasn't at the restaurant at the time, but caught wind of the accusation and arrived not long after. Butler was one of Karen's friends, but he sat with Willie and calmed him down. The two drank together until the early hours of the morning, when Butler took Willie back to his doctor's clinic. According to Butler, he continued drinking for a while before Willie received a mysterious phone call and left. He's never been seen or heard from again. Later that morning, a cleaner found Willie's van parked outside the restaurant, but not in the location Willie normally parked. It was partially hidden from view, and the keys were still in the ignition. The door to the kitchen was also open, which was very unusual. There was no sign of Willie anywhere. It would be a few days before Willie was reported missing, and at first, the case wasn't taken seriously. The police believed this was some kind of stunt by the celebrity chef, and he would reappear soon. But it became clear that wasn't the case. Both the cleaner and a local police officer reported seeing a dark-colored American-style car parked outside the restaurant, with a light-colored van following close behind. It's not known if the car or van had anything to do with Willie's disappearance, but the drivers have also never come forward to clear themselves. Willie's children and investigators believe someone took his life that night. If Karen knew anything about her husband's disappearance, she took those secrets to her grave in 2022. The case remains unsolved. 30-year-old George Panka set off on June 17, 2011, with high hopes for the day ahead. George had joined his church group of around 80 members in their trip to the Yosemite National Park, and the group had spent time hiking and exploring the natural beauty of the park. George was described by those who knew him best as a very active member of his church in Lawndale, and a devoted son to his mother. On June 17, 2011, George and around 20 others decided to walk the Upper Yosemite Fall Trail. According to the National Park's website, the trail leads to North America's tallest waterfall, and those who make the journey will be rewarded with spectacular scenery of the valleys below. George and the rest of the group successfully made it to the top of the trail, and stopped to take in the natural beauty before them. The group agreed that they would descend at their own pace, and broke off into two groups. At some point during this descent, George became separated from his group, who assumed that George had gone down without them or was behind them. His friends confirmed to authorities that they last saw him getting water from a creek on the trail at around 2:40 p.m. that afternoon. When the group reached the Yosemite Valley floor and found no sign of George, alarm bells started to ring. They waited for everyone on the trail to regroup, and by 9 p.m., George still hadn't turned up. It was then that they decided to contact the National Park Service and report him missing. A search of the trail and surrounding areas was conducted, with over 105 people from various agencies joining the search for George. Despite an extensive search effort, no sign of George was ever found, and as of 2022, he remains missing. George Panka is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes, 5'10" to 5'11", and 230 to 240 pounds. He was last seen wearing a black tank top or black t-shirt with the image of a dog tag reading D&B on the front, gray tracksuit bottoms with a black and white stripe down the leg, and gray and blue shoes. He was also carrying a blue cloth bag with limited supplies. Authorities believe that George either got lost or became injured on the trail, and despite numerous search and rescue attempts, nothing has ever been found. George's friends and family are now desperate for answers as to what happened to their loved one. Anyone with information is urged to contact Special Agent Steve Yu of the Yosemite National Park Service on 209-379-1992, quoting case number NP1403-4311. You can also contact Allison O'Neill of NamUs at 817-372-4169. 18-year-old Dalen Pua from the Big Island, Hawaii, was always looking for the next big adventure. In 2015, Dalen was in his final year at school, and in February of 2015, he was on the island of Oahu for a school trip. Dalen's grandmother, Martha Bear, agreed that he could stay with her over the weekend, giving the two an excuse to spend some quality time together. However, that quality time would be cut short on February 27, 2015, when Dalen boarded a bus headed for the infamous Stairway to Heaven, also known as the Haiku Stairs. This trail is a very dangerous one, with the Hawaiian government making it illegal to hike in 1987. However, that hasn't stopped people. Dalen had told his grandmother that he wanted to hike these stairs, and his plans were met with concern and a stern warning. His grandmother warned him that those stairs were closed to the public due to safety concerns, and that attempting to go there was a bad idea. Several people had been stopped by the police and given fines of $1,000, and some even faced prison time, but this didn't deter Dalen. On the morning of February 27, 2015, he packed his bags, said goodbye to his grandmother, and boarded a bus. Martha had no idea that this would be the last time she would ever see her grandson. We know that Dalen reached the trail of the Haiku Stairs at around 11 a.m. He sent pictures to his family members showing off the trail and the natural beauty that surrounded them. After this, Dalen was never to be seen or heard from again. When he failed to return home to his grandmother's house, she contacted the police and a wide-scale search began. The local police, fire department, US Navy, and volunteers flocked to the trail to try and find any sign of Dalen, but they came up empty-handed. Some volunteers even brought drones to try to help find him, but there was no sign of him. As the hours passed, his family were desperate for answers, and after studying the photos that he'd sent earlier that day, they made a shocking discovery. Hidden deep in the bushes of one of Dalen's photos, they discovered a strange man crouching and looking as though he was watching him. Dalen's family shared this discovery with the local authorities. However, they were never able to identify the man. Was this merely a coincidence, or was Dalen being followed on the trail? The search continued, and after a few days, the search was scaled back and eventually suspended. This hasn't stopped Dalen's family and locals from looking for him though, and his family continues to spread awareness about his case. In an interview for Hawaii News Now, Dalen's uncle, Chris Nazara, said that they were overwhelmed by the support from the local community, and said that it shows the aloha spirit at work and truly reflects Hawaii and its people. Despite numerous searches and media appeals, no sign of Dalen Pua has ever been found. His family and friends haven't given up hope that they will one day have answers for what happened to him. Dalen is described as a Pacific Islander with black hair and brown eyes, 5'7" and 150 pounds. He was last seen wearing a white long-sleeve t-shirt, black surf shorts, slippers, and was carrying a red backpack. Anyone with information is urged to contact Detective Michael Garcia of the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111, quoting case number 1508-2583. The sudden disappearance of Gilbert Gilman has baffled experts for many years, and the details surrounding his disappearance have led to many questions. Did Gilbert disappear because he got lost in the wilderness, or did he run away to become a spy for the US? According to sources, Gilbert's career had been a colorful one. He'd worked as a military interrogator in counterintelligence for the Defense Intelligence Agency, and had served in Panama, East Africa, Israel, Yemen, and Mongolia. He had also worked with the United Nations and was involved in politics before finally deciding to settle down in Seattle, Washington. In 2006, Gilbert was working as the deputy director of the Washington State Pension Fund, and by all accounts, he was taking life at a much slower pace than he had done previously. On June 24, 2006, Gilbert decided to make the best of the weather and packed his camera for a quick hike in the Olympic National Park. Park ranger Sanny Lustig encountered Gilbert near the Staircase Rapid Loops Trail after approaching him and asking him to turn down the music in his car. Sanny would be the last person to see Gilbert, and when he failed to show up for work on June 25, 2006, he was reported missing. In the days following his disappearance, park rangers, volunteers, and other search and rescue teams tried desperately to find him, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. A few days into the search, Gilbert's silver 2005 Ford Thunderbird convertible was found at the Staircase Ranger Station, close to where he was last seen. According to reports, neither his car nor the car park yielded any clues, and investigators quickly found themselves at a dead end. Despite an extensive search of the trail and the surrounding areas, no sign of Gilbert has ever been found, and this has led to some interesting theories. Due to his background, Gilbert's mother, Doris, believes that he voluntarily disappeared because he decided to become a spy for the US. Gilbert was in good health at the time of his disappearance, and had extensive experience in rugged terrain, similar to that of the Olympic National Park. Many have pointed out that the Staircase Rapid Loops Trail is very short, making it almost impossible for someone to disappear without being found. Israel Keyes has also been tied to Gilbert's disappearance, and his name is mentioned in an FBI document pertaining to Israel's case. While the report concludes that Israel likely wasn't involved with Gilbert's disappearance, it does provide some important information about Gilbert's possible spy work. The file reads, quote, "Doris added that before his disappearance, her son asked her to bring books to the beach house in New York State. The books were titled Taking Risk, with a section titled Searching for Gods, and Dante's Inferno. She said a portion of one book relates to going for a walk in the woods. She believes that Gilbert asking for the books may have been an attempt by her son to send a message to the family. As of 2022, Gilbert's case remains unsolved, leaving us with an abundance of theories. Gilbert is described as a white male with graying brown hair and brown eyes, 5'7" and 155 to 165 pounds. Gilbert wears glasses and his vision is severely limited without them. He's also fluent in English, Arabic, Russian, and Chinese. If you have any information, you're asked to contact Detective Roland Weiss of the Thurston County Sheriff's Office at 360-786-550, quoting case number 0605-808-06. 21-year-old Drake Kramer had recently finished his associate's degree at Northwest Vista College and had enrolled at the University of Texas to study geology. By all accounts, the future was looking bright for Drake, and those who knew him best described him as a hard-working, good student who loved nature. On January 31st, 2015, Drake's behavior took a strange turn, and over the following days, a mystery began to unfold. On January 31st, 2015, Drake texted his family, saying that he'd driven to California and then on to the Grand Canyon. Records confirm that Drake checked into the Bright Angel Lodge on the south rim of the Grand Canyon National Park on January 31st, 2015. In his text, Drake said that he loved everyone and told them that he needed to be back with Mother Nature and set his soul free. After this, Drake was never heard from again. Witnesses at the Bright Angel Lodge reported seeing Drake on February 1st, 2015, but after that, he vanished into thin air. In the days before Drake's impromptu trip to the Grand Canyon, he'd spent time with his family, who said that he was in good spirits and showed no signs that anything was wrong. After receiving this bizarre text, his family members tried to get a hold of him, and as February 2nd rolled around and there'd still been no contact, they officially reported him missing. A large search of the area was conducted, but nothing was found. The only piece of evidence Drake left behind was his car in the car park of the lodge. Drake is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes, 5'6" to 5'8", and 135 to 145 pounds. He was last seen wearing a gray and green sweatshirt, blue jeans, and a dark bandana or dark baseball hat with black Adidas shoes. Anyone with information is asked to contact Philip Oakes of the Grand Canyon National Park Service on 928-814-3652, quoting case number NP15009-239. 22-year-old David Barclay Miller was employed by the Sedona Forest Service in 1998, and his colleagues never expected that somehow down the line they would be searching for one of their own. According to David's family, from a young age, David showed an interest in the outdoors, and his parents couldn't hold their adventurous son down. If there was a mountain range to be explored or a trail to be hiked, rest assured that David had already either completed it or had it on his to-do list. David's high school sports coach told the Washington Post, quote, "I've coached for 20 years and I've never seen a kid like him who would give everything he had." So when David graduated from Bates College in Maine, the world truly was his oyster. Shortly after his graduation, David received a phone call that would change his life forever. The U.S. Forest Service wanted to hire him, and shortly after, he started his dream job. That job was short-lived though, and when David failed to report for work on May 21st, 1998, His coworkers knew that something was wrong. David was last seen on May 19th at the Beaver Creek Ranger Station and had left a note telling his coworkers that he was going to hike in the Red Rock Secret Mountain Wilderness area. David had planned to go on a 2.5-day hike before returning to work. However, this never happened. When his coworkers realized he was missing, a wide-scale search began, but no sign of David was ever found. The only piece of evidence was his abandoned car at Vultee Arch Trail, but this did little to help the investigation. David's friends and family never forgot about him and hoped that one day they will finally have answers. Investigators noted that it was strange for someone as well versed with the terrain around them to simply vanish into thin air. David Barclay Miller is described as a white male with sandy blonde hair and blue-green eyes, 5'11" and 160 pounds. He's known to wear glasses or contact lenses and was last seen wearing a shirt, shorts, black hiking boots, and was carrying a forest green Gregory backpack. Anyone with information is asked to contact the sheriff's office on 520-771-3260, quoting case number 9814554. Hyun Song, affectionately known by her friends as Cindy, was born in South Korea in February of 1980. Cindy spent the majority of her childhood in South Korea before moving to the United States in 1995 when she was just 15 years old. According to sources, Cindy moved in with her aunt and uncle in Springfield, Virginia, as she wanted to attend an American college and have the best start in life that was possible. However, years later, Cindy would become the focus of a disturbing missing person case that would haunt her family and the college community. After graduating high school, Cindy enrolled at the Pennsylvania State University, where she majored in integrative arts. In 2001, Cindy was in her senior year and was just months away from graduating in the spring of 2002. That was until she mysteriously vanished on October 31st, 2001. On that evening, Cindy decided to take a break from studying and join her friends in their Halloween celebrations. Cindy, along with two friends, Stacy and Lisa, dressed themselves up in their best fancy dress and headed to a costume party at Players Nightclub, located on College Avenue. According to Stacy and Lisa, the three stayed at the party until around 2 a.m., and after leaving the club, they headed to a friend's house to carry on. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and Cindy appeared in good spirits as she partied with her friends and played video games. The party slowly began to die down, and Cindy's friends last saw her at 4 a.m. when they dropped her off at her apartment on Clinton Avenue. November 1st, 2001 was the last time that anyone heard from Cindy Song, and it wouldn't be until November 4th that her friends reported her missing when she failed to make contact with them. Upon searching her apartment, police found her backpack and a pair of false eyelashes that she had worn to the party. The prevailing theory is that Cindy visited a 24-hour store, and police found that her phone, keys, and purse were missing from the apartment. Sadly, Cindy's phone had been turned off, and there'd been no incoming or outgoing calls on the morning of November 1st, 2001. Cindy's disappearance was a complete mystery, and from the start, the police had little evidence or clues to work with. There was no sign of a struggle present in Cindy's apartment, and no one had come forward with any viable leads. November 21st, 2021 marks the 20th anniversary of Cindy's mysterious disappearance, and police are still no closer to solving her case. Hyunjung Cindy Song was last seen on November 1st, 2001, near her apartment close to the campus of Pennsylvania State University. She was last seen wearing a rabbit costume, which is made up of a pink shirt, rabbit ears, a white tennis skirt, and a bunny tail attached, brown suede knee-high boots, and a red parka coat. She's described as an Asian female with black hair and brown eyes, and has her ears and belly button pierced. If you have any information about the disappearance of Cindy Song, you're asked to contact the Ferguson Township Police Department at 814-237-1172. 20-year-old Sean Ritchie spent the day of October 31st, 2014, with his family in Fraserburgh, Scotland. According to his family, Sean seemed to be in good spirits and told them of his plans to spend the evening with friends in Greenburn. Sean said his goodbyes to his family, and none of them knew that this would be the last time they would see him alive. After saying goodbye, Sean began his evening celebrations with his friends. The group of friends piled into a van and drove down the A981 to a remote farmhouse in the Greenburn area to attend a Halloween party. The night went on as planned, and the friends partied until the early hours of November 1st, 2014. By the end of the night, the group of friends had separated and split into two groups, with each group believing that Sean was with the other. They were convinced that he was safe and well, and decided to head home without confirming with the other group or checking the farmhouse for him. When Sean didn't return home, his parents began to worry. He wasn't picking up his phone, and none of his friends had seen him. When Sean failed to return home by November 2nd, 2014, his parents contacted the police to officially report him missing and kickstart an investigation. It would take until November 6th, 2014, for police to get their first break in the case. On the 6th, while searching the area surrounding the farmhouse, they found a belt, trainers, and a hooded top, all of which belonged to Sean. Despite this breakthrough, there was still no sign of Sean, and as of 2021, Scottish police are still no closer to solving the case. During the investigation, it was uncovered that 2 calls were made to 999 on October 31st. One caller asked for police to be sent to the farmhouse, and the second caller requested that the help be cancelled. The identity of these callers has never been made public. Scottish police have spent millions of dollars on the search for Sean Ritchie, utilizing ground-penetrating radar as well as consulting with experts from across the UK. Despite all of this, Sean Ritchie remains missing, and the Fraserburgh police consider his case to be an open inquiry. There's currently a $5,000 reward for information, and anyone is asked to dial the non-emergency number 101 or contact the Fraserburgh police station directly at 440-1786-289-070. Details of the mysterious disappearance of Cameron Hardman are few and far between, and while that makes it difficult to investigate, that doesn't mean that Cameron's case should be forgotten about. 31-year-old Cameron Hardman of Sharon Hill, Pennsylvania, was last seen on Halloween night of 2011. According to friends, Cameron hopped in his car on Newland Avenue and was headed for the 4500 block of Carmack Street to meet up with friends and join in on the Halloween celebrations. But as the hours ticked by, his friends realized that Cameron wasn't coming. At first, it was believed that he may have gone elsewhere or had something else to do. However, when he failed to make contact with his friends and family, they knew that something was very wrong. After failing to make contact with him, Cameron was reported missing, and on November 7th, 2011, police made a horrifying discovery. On the 5200 block of North 2nd Street, they found Cameron's abandoned 2001 black BMW 7401. Inside were his keys, phone, and wallet, but no sign of Cameron. There was also no sign of a struggle, and the car had been abandoned just 7 blocks from 4500 Carmack Street. Since November 7th, there has been no sign of Cameron, and his disappearance has turned cold. Cameron Hardman is described as an African-American male with black hair and brown eyes. He's 5'6" and about 200 pounds. He was last seen wearing a button-down polo shirt, a red and blue vest, navy blue cargo pants, brown Timberland boots, and a blue baseball cap. Cameron's family are appealing to anyone with information to come forward, and if you believe you may know anything about Cameron's disappearance, you're asked to contact the Darby Township Police Department at 610-583-3245. 34-year-old Christina Bastian's battle with bipolar disorder has been a long and arduous one, with friends and family being there for her during the battles that she faced to get herself stabilized. Christina has been formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2005, and ever since then, she's been taking medication and working with doctors to help cope with her symptoms. At first, the road was rough, but as the years passed, Christina found the right medication and treatment for her, and was on the road to living a normal life. That was until October of 2015, when friends and family noticed that Christina was behaving strangely. She'd stopped taking her medication against the advice of her doctor, and had become increasingly paranoid, telling people that someone had broken into her apartment in Apple Valley, California, and that she was too scared to stay there anymore. According to news reports, in the days before her mysterious disappearance, in the early hours of November 1st, 2015, Christina had taken most of her belongings from her apartment and was sofa surfing at friends' houses until she could find somewhere else to live. On October 31st, 2015, Christina was spending the night at a friend's house. However, at around 1:45 a.m., she became visibly upset and left without telling the friend where she was going. Christina's friend told police that she had left with her Maltese poodle mix dog, Coco, and had gotten into her car and driven off. Her friend noticed that Christina had left behind her wallet, ID, and glasses, along with other possessions that she would have needed. Unsure of what to do, the friend waited, hoping that Christina would return, but she never did. Hours later, the California Highway Patrol discovered Christina's silver two-door Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck, abandoned on the side of Valley View Road and 29 Palms Highway in the Morongo Valley. The Highway Patrol also discovered several of Christina's belongings along Highway 247 and Bodick Road, and noted that Christina's car had several scratches and dents on the side. After contacting friends and family, the California Highway Patrol learned that Christina had only owned the car for around 2 weeks, and it should have been in near perfect condition, only adding to the mystery of her disappearance. The next update would come on November 11th, 2015, when Christina's backpack was found on Bear Valley Road. Police have not made an official comment as to what was found inside the bag, and have declined to comment further on the matter. During their investigation, Apple Valley Police discovered that on October 30th, 2015, Christina had made a 700-mile trip from Apple Valley to Phoenix, Arizona and back. She had also taken the SIM card out of her phone before snapping the phone in half and disposing of it. In the days leading up to her disappearance, she confided in her brother-in-law that she didn't want to be Christina Bastian anymore and wanted to disappear. Christina is described as a white male with red hair and brown eyes. Both of her ears are pierced, and she has a tattoo of a cherry blossom and Chinese script on her left foot and ankle. She requires medication to treat her bipolar disorder, and at the time of her disappearance, she has not been taking said medication. Christina also has a strong prescription for her eyesight and disappeared without her glasses, something that she would have been unable to drive without. She also has a scar on her right eyebrow from an old piercing, and a scar on her thumb. Christina's family are concerned for her safety, and are appealing to anyone with information to contact the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department at 909-387-3690, or the Apple Valley Police Department at 760-240-7400. On Halloween night of 1993, residents of a trailer park in Winchester, Virginia, had their celebrations interrupted by a domestic disturbance. William Dudley and his girlfriend, Cindy Benner, had gotten into an argument earlier that evening, with Cindy asking William to not go on her property, as he was intoxicated and was becoming agitated. Despite Cindy's pleas, William approached her property and knocked on the door, assuring her that he had calmed down and was ready to talk. As William entered Cindy's home, he hit her in the face and began shouting at her, waking up the other occupants. Soon, other residents from nearby homes rushed to the scene to try to calm William down and to remove him from the property. After a struggle and altercation with several people, William apologized to Cindy and was on his way home. Cindy's family and those present during the event warned William that he should go home and that the issue could be resolved in the morning. After much convincing, he turned around and walked towards his own home. This would be the last time William Dudley was seen alive, and it would take almost 2 months for him to be reported as missing. Upon searching his home, his keys, wallet, and other personal items had been neatly placed on a table, and there were no signs of a struggle. Despite a thorough search and investigation, nothing was found that could lead investigators to William's whereabouts. Investigators believed that William had met with foul play on that Halloween night in 1993. But without solid evidence, all they can do is speculate. William Dudley is described as a white male with dark blonde hair and blue eyes. He stands at 6 foot to 6'2" and is 200 to 215 pounds. He also wears prescription glasses and has a tattoo of a cougar on a log on his right arm. If you have any information, you're asked to contact the Frederick County Sheriff's Office at 540-662-6168. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.